We're already a little bit behind schedule, and we would like to make up the time. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's thrilling to see the turnout. My name is Jeannie Reeb, and I'm co-chair of the Branton Committee, along with my fellow co-chair, Neil Eggleston, and the board of directors, co-chairs, Claudia Withers and Joe Davis. We're all delighted, thrilled to welcome you to the 2024 Wiley A. Branton Awards. It's wonderful to see so many friends, supporters, and advocates from the community today. We're glad to have you all with us to celebrate the important work of the committee promoting civil rights on both the local and national levels. It's been over 56 years since the committee was founded, and while we've made incredible strides, we continue to fight the fight for civil rights. And today, we have to hold the line on the rollback of individual rights and freedoms. And now, more than ever, is the time for our community to dig deeper and dig harder to ensure that the WLC and its work continues for another 50 years. All of you here today have shown a remarkable commitment to our collective work, demonstrated by co-counseling an important case, partnering with the local school, volunteering for our clinic, running an associates campaign, or sponsoring and attending this wonderful event. It's your generosity that makes the work of the Washington Lawyers Committee possible. We're grateful for the pro bono work of our law firm partners, associates, and staff. Day after day, you help dismantle injustice and pursue and advocate for lasting change. So thank you. I'm excited to announce that this year we raised more than $1.19 million for this lunch. Woo! This came from over 60 firms, organizations, and individuals. We are so painfully close to our announced $1.2 million goal. $1.194 million sets an all-time Branton high so far and comprises 30% of the total budget for the Washington Lawyers Committee. Thank you for everyone who contributed to this record-breaking luncheon. So it's now my distinct privilege and pleasure to introduce our fearless leader, Joanne Lynn. Joanne took the reins of the Washington Lawyers Committee in April of 2023, and she has taken all of us by storm. During just her first year as executive director, she's brought on a talented new leadership team, recruited 13 new board members, overseeing the organization's most successful Branton Luncheon ever, and the Associates campaign, and has been the recipient of a $900,000 gift from the philanthropist Mackenzie Scott, which is the single largest individual gift in the organization's entire history. So please give a shout out to welcome Joanne to the stage.
Thank you, Jeannie, for that incredibly kind introduction. Friends, it is truly a joy and honor to be here with all of you at the 2024 Wiley Branton Awards Luncheon. The Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs was established in 1968 in the aftermath of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. For the past 56 years, the Washington Lawyers Committee has mobilized Washington's lawyers in the fight for civil rights, tackling the critical racial justice issues of our time, education equity, disability justice, fair housing, workers' rights, immigrant justice, and criminal legal system reform. We have fought against white supremacy and time again have shown that we are stronger than hate. In our 56-year history, we have brought about tangible, effective, and lasting change. How have we achieved this human rights impact? By harnessing the power and resources of this vast network of Washington law firms and corporations that together bring cutting-edge systemic litigation to advance racial equity. The Washington Lawyers Committee functions as the hub for Washington law firms and companies to engage in pro bono litigation on behalf of individuals, families, and communities seeking justice. Today, we continue that vital mission, both inside and outside the courts. We gather today as a community to collectively renew our commitment to striving for racial equity in the District of Columbia, in our nation's capital, in the DMV, and across the country. And we gather in the name and spirit of Wiley A. Branton, who personifies the legal profession's ideal of pro bono service that is at the very heart of the mission of the Washington Lawyers Committee. Wiley Branton was a tireless advocate for civil rights and equal justice. In the 1950s, he worked in the South with Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP. He represented the Freedom Riders in Mississippi, who desegregated public transportation and public accommodations. He litigated the case that desegregated Little Rock public schools, securing an injunction that led to President Eisenhower calling out federal troops to escort Black children to school. In the 1960s, Wiley Branton led the Voter Education Project in Atlanta, registering more than 600,000 African Americans. President Johnson appointed Wiley Branton to lead the President's Council on Equal Opportunity and then to work on implementation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. In 1967, Wiley Branton became the executive director of Washington, D.C.'s Anti-Poverty Agency. And between 1978 and 1983, he served as dean of Howard Law School, where he trained the next generation of racial justice lawyers. We are so honored to be joined today by Wiley Branton's daughter, Beverly Branton Lamberson, and his granddaughter, Erica Lamberson. Will you please stand? Before we launch into today's program, let me first thank the many, many people who support the Washington Lawyers Committee day in and day out. First, a hearty thank you to all our generous sponsors. As Jeannie mentioned, dozens of law firms and corporations have given over $1.1 million. We are just shy of $1.2 million. At the Washington Lawyers Committee, $1.2 million is enough to pay the salaries of a dozen attorneys. Special thanks to our Branton leaders, Kirkland and Ellis, Covington and Burling, Latham and Watkins, Paul Hastings, Wilmer Hale, and Sidley Austin. And thank you to all our amazing sponsors. 1,000 thanks to all of you for your tremendous support. Today's luncheon would not have been possible without the superb leadership of our Branton Committee chairs, Jeannie Rhee and Neil Eggleston. Would the Branton Committee members please stand? Thank you for working these many months in order to make today's luncheon a success. Not only did we have a tremendously successful year in Branton sponsorships, we also had a record-breaking year in our Associates campaign, raising over $500,000. Special shout out to Wilmer Hale, who raised over $76,000 and finished atop our leaderboard for the 4th consecutive year. We also salute the other top teams, several which achieved 100% participation among associates. Our top associate campaign teams were Skadden Arps, Wilkinson Steckloff, Wilkie Farr, Williams Connolly, Paul Hastings, Jenner Block, Zuckerman Spader, and Miller and Chevalier. This year's immensely successful associates campaign was supported by our terrific board of directors. This amazing crew of volunteers gives their time, talent, and resources to lead and govern the Washington Lawyers Committee. Finally, and most importantly, I want to thank the heart and soul of the Washington Lawyers Committee, our staff. They are a small but mighty army of paralegals, lawyers, fundraisers, operations specialists, whether they are representing Latina construction workers who have been sexually harassed, or interviewing prisoners denied medical care and mental health care, or working with tenants fighting for safe homes for their children. The staff at the Washington Lawyers Committee fights day in and day out without ceasing to advance justice and equity for low-income communities of color. Would the staff and the board of the Washington Lawyers Committee please stand? Join me in thanking this talented, dedicated team. We have an extraordinary program ahead of us. Today is about celebrating those who have put in the real hard work to make the promises of racial justice real and accessible to everyone. I am thrilled and honored to present the following awards for outstanding pro bono achievement. In 2020, a woman inquired about renting an apartment in Northwest DC. She was told that the landlord did not accept housing choice vouchers. Vouchers play an important role in ensuring that low-income renters can afford safe, decent housing. In Washington, D.C., nearly all voucher recipients are Black. This woman ended up renting a smaller apartment with fewer amenities in a different neighborhood that did not meet all her needs. She contacted the Equal Rights Center, an organization that conducts civil rights testing of housing complexes. The law firm of Paul Hastings joined forces with Equal Rights Center and the Washington Lawyers Committee to sue the housing provider, a major multi-state corporation. In 2023, the matter settled. The housing provider will now comply with fair housing laws in all current and future residential properties. Congratulations to Paul Hastings for outstanding achievement in securing and advancing fair housing on behalf of low-income families. Mr. Ashley worked at the Government Services Agency, GSA, for over 13 years, consistently receiving strong performance evaluations. He is blind and thus was not able to access the software essential to his job. During his 13 years at GSA, he was not given equal opportunities for professional advancement and was denied promotions. The law firm of Covington and Burling joined forces with the Washington Lawyers Committee to sue GSA for failing to provide reasonable accommodations and failing to ensure that Mr. Ashley had the same professional opportunities of his peers. Covington reached a settlement with GSA to compensate Mr. Ashley for discrimination suffered and to provide him with funds to support his professional development. Congratulations to Covington and Burling and to Daniel Valencia, now at DLA Piper, for their outstanding achievement in disability justice and workers' rights. Mayor Brown joined forces with Disability Rights Maryland and Washington Lawyers Committee to represent Mr. Coster, who has bipolar disorder. One day, while visiting his mother, he began to exhibit symptoms related to the bipolar disorder. His mother drove him to a sheriff's office in Maryland to seek help in getting him admitted to a hospital. Rather than render aid, the officers tased him 5 separate times, dragging him out of his car, beating him, and detaining him overnight. His shoulder was dislocated, and he suffered other painful injuries. In 2023, the case was settled. Congratulations to Mayor Brown for their outstanding work in combating police violence and advancing disability justice. While we partner with law firms to bring systemic litigation, we also rely upon dozens of volunteers, many who are not lawyers. One of the gems of the Washington Lawyers Committee is our Workers' Rights Clinic, which is powered by our staff and an army of dedicated volunteers. Our clinics provide free, short-term legal advice on wage theft, sexual harassment, and other employment discrimination issues. When COVID shut down the country, our workers' rights clinics kept going, operating on a virtual basis every week. Since emerging from the pandemic, our volunteers have given up their Saturdays to travel to our Anacostia clinic to provide free legal advice. Today, our Anacostia clinic and virtual clinics reach construction workers, restaurant workers, cleaners, and other low-income workers. Today, we are delighted to honor 2 of our clinic volunteers, Stan Zirkin, a retired lawyer, and Angela Sanyal, a retired nurse. We hope their stories will inspire many of you to volunteer with our Workers' Rights Clinic.
Advice and assistance to mostly low-income workers who feel that they've been mistreated by their employers and don't know if they have any way.
We have a lot of different kind of intake volunteers. It can be paralegals, law students, undergrad students, government workers. We have so many different stories coming from different workers of how they came to know about the Workers' Rights Clinic. And so they help a lot of workers that are construction workers, cleaners, really different industries like restaurant workers, and also consultants sometimes.
As an intake volunteer, I am the person who interviews the worker that have come to the office with a complaint of something being wrong done at work. So I talk to them and they tell me the story, and then we have a form that we also fill out. It's an intake form with all the demographics and all the details of the person's place of work. But we essentially get the story. I mean, what has happened, what has gone wrong, why are you here, and what are you expecting out of this visit to our clinic. I come back because I have a tremendous satisfaction to be talking to mostly workers. Mostly I get assigned to workers that speak Spanish, and these in general are immigrants into the country that have experienced some injustice during their work that impacts their life tremendously. But by talking to them, I feel that they get to tell their story, and their story gets validated. It does get assessed by the attorneys, and they do get a legal advice. So it feels very important to me. I do have a sense of solidarity with the workers that come over and work.
Prior to volunteering at the Employment Justice Center, I worked as a career attorney for the National Labor Relations Board, prosecuting employers and unions who violated federal court orders in civil and criminal contempt. one of the main sources of satisfaction I had from that job was the fact that I was able to help people who had no idea whether they had any rights at all, and I was able to vindicate some of their rights. Volunteering as an attorney for the Washington Lawyers Committee serves a certain purpose. I get the same feeling of satisfaction that I can't duplicate anywhere else.
Hello, my name is Joanna Wasik, and I'm a Deputy Legal Director at the Washington Lawyers Committee. It is my honor to introduce this year's Alfred McKenzie Award. The Alfred McKenzie Award was established in 1994 to recognize community partners or clients who have stood with us to achieve significant civil rights victories. For 2024, we are thrilled to give the McKenzie Award to an outstanding organization, Beloved Community Incubator, as well as our amazing clients in our case challenging DC's Clean Hands Law. Kasai Gebrebrahan, Medine Ayele, Hiwet Tesfamichael, Fasika Mehabe, Antonia Diaz de Sanchez, Stephanie Carrington, and Sean Cheatham. Beloved Community Incubator plays a vital role in DC's worker community. BCI is a solidarity economy movement organization that centers people, especially poor and working class workers and people of color, over profit. Beloved Community Incubator provides incubation and back-end support for worker-owned cooperatives, collectives, and solidarity economy projects in the DMV region. BCI and the Washington Lawyers Committee have worked together to break down barriers to safe and accessible street vending in DC. In June 2023, BCI assisted the Washington Lawyers Committee in filing a challenge to a DC law that prohibits anyone with more than $100 in debt to the DC government from obtaining a professional license. In turn, the Washington Lawyers Committee has supported groundbreaking organizing and advocacy by BCI and the DC street vendor community, which culminated in legislation creating increased pathways to lawful, safe, accessible vending in DC. Please take a look.
We have something called the Clean Hands Law, which prevents people from obtaining occupational licenses in over 125 professions if they owe over $100 of debt to the DC government. And we were working closely with Beloved Community Incubator, which is a local organization here in DC that promotes economic solidarity in the district. And they work closely with street vendors, and there were many street vendors that stopped working during the pandemic, and their licenses expired, but they were still accumulating a minimum sales tax debt. And when they went to the licensing office to try to renew their licenses, they found out that they had this debt and it wasn't allowing them to obtain the license because of the Clean Hands Law.
I'm working since 91, the street vending. So I sell hot dog, half smoke, cookie, chips, soda, juice. So I'm living. I have also I raise three my niece because the father is passed away and the mother passed away. So I brought here from Ethiopia and almost 6 years with me. And now they have own place. So still I am struggle. So soon I come back to work, I hope.
Kasai continued to be charged sales tax into the pandemic when he couldn't work because it was not safe to work. So he continued to be assessed the minimum quarterly sales tax until his license term fully expired. And it's $375 every 3 months.
Yes.
So this makes no sense, and Kasai ended up with that big bill, and that big bill needed to be paid before Kasai could access his Clean Hands certificate. So this is one way that the Clean Hands certificate really acts as a barrier, preventing vendors from even being able to apply for a license. If you owe more than $100 to the DC government for any reason,
We are currently in litigation challenging the constitutionality of the Clean Hands Law to make sure that this isn't a barrier for people who have debt and want to get back to work. We are also in the process of advocating with Beloved Community Incubator to implement the Street Vendor Amnesty Program, which they worked to recently pass. This program would allow specifically street vendors to obtain their licenses while still having their debt and work to be able to pay off that debt. We don't want a law like the Clean Hands Law to be a barrier for employment, and it creates this poverty trap that doesn't allow people to work or pay off their debt. This can be done through litigation, advocacy. On all fronts, we are trying to combat this law.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Relman. The Boggs Award is named in honor of Rod Boggs, whom many of you know well. Rod served as the executive director of the Washington Lawyers Committee from its inception in 1968 until 2014. And Rod is here today, sitting at the head table. Rod, if you would stand, please. The Rod Boggs Award recognizes a member of the legal profession who has made a sustained commitment to the Washington Lawyers Committee, its clients, and its values. This year, it is my privilege and pleasure to present the Rod Boggs Award to George Ruddinger. George's association with the Washington Lawyers Committee began nearly 4 decades ago. That is when I first got to know George. I was the relatively new director of the Fair Housing Project, and we were working closely on some of our most important cases. It was a foundational period for the committee. George and his firm, Crowell & Mooring, took on a series of new generation discrimination cases against Avis Rent-A-Car, NV Homes, and First Virginia Bank, to name just a few, that made new fair housing, fair lending, and public accommodations law. There is no litigator I admire more than George. For me, he represents the finest qualities of the legendary law firm partners who built the DC Bar's pro bono tradition. He is true to the cause, a brilliant and fearless courtroom advocate who is smart and strategic in ways that are both practical and savvy. Like other giants of the DC Bar who helped power the committee's rise to prominence, George combined a deeply felt commitment to civil rights with a demanding national and international commercial litigation practice. He was the guiding influence at his own firm in creating one of the finest pro bono practices in the country. In fact, Crowell & Mooring was the first firm to create a full-time attorney counsel position to lead their pro bono practice. I relied on George and learned from him. He was a great mentor and friend. He kept me out of trouble when I pushed too hard with a case. To me, he was what I call a lawyer's lawyer, a master craftsman at his profession, a gifted writer when the chips were down and we had to win a motion, an important motion, one on which the case turned. No matter what else George had on his incredibly busy litigation docket, he would bury himself in the record and craft a brief that would sing. He always found a way to win. But most important to me, then and now, he is just a great human being. He steers the ship with humility, a great sense of humor, and a moral compass. He is a colleague and a friend with a heart of gold, whom you can always count on to be wise and fair. If George is on your team, he is with you to the end. He has been that and more to the Washington Lawyers Committee and its client organizations these many years. George has served on the board of the committee since 1996. He is the longest-serving board member in the committee's history. He served as the general counsel of the Equal Rights Center for 15 years and as co-chair of the board in 2009. In 2011, he was the recipient of the Wiley Branton Award. If you want to talk about a sustained commitment to the Washington Lawyers Committee, its clients, and its values, other than the person for whom this award is named, it is hard to think of a person alive today who better fits that description. Please join me in congratulating George Redinger.
The first one was in 1990. It was called Wilson v. NV Homes. This was a really fascinating one. This was one where they owned a very nice house in the Shaw neighborhood, the Wilsons did, and the NV Homes had this thing called the Guarantee Buy program, where they would actually finance part of your down payment to try to make the houses, the NV Homes, more affordable. So the Wilsons wanted to buy an NV Homes house out in suburban Maryland, and the appraiser who came around drove up to their house. It was in Shaw at the time. Drove up to their house and looked at it, got back in her car and drove away. And needless to say, they didn't get the loan. So we brought suit and got a nice settlement and some injunctive relief. The other fair housing case that really sticks out with the Washington Lawyers Committee was a case called Boyer v. First Virginia Bank. And Spencer Boyer was a law professor at Howard Law School. He owned a beautiful house in Silver Spring. He had a substantial net worth. He had an R1 credit rating. He went to First Virginia Bank to get, as he did periodically, a home equity loan to do some renovations, $50,000 home equity loan, and he was turned down. And being an African American who had been, as many have experienced, got stopped for driving while black, his antenna was up. He sent out his application in the mail to 5 other banks, one of which was an affiliate of First Virginia Bank, and got approved by all of them. So we brought suit, we fought off a summary judgment motion. We got a lot of the underwriting materials for other loans, and it showed a disparity between the way white and black applicants were treated, and we again got a substantial settlement with injunctive relief.
It's his intellect, it's his knowledge of the law, it's his knowledge of litigation, it's his knowledge of the committee, it's his knowledge of the ERC, it's his compassion for the victims of illegal discrimination, it's his phenomenal understanding of how to move forward. And that was absolutely critical to the successes that we achieved. I think George has a pure understanding of what the good of law is supposed to attain. I think it's absolutely in his DNA to care so deeply about what is harming people's lives and what is damaging to this nation.
Few people know that George actually was the architect of the Pro Bono Council position. When Kroll was approaching its 10th anniversary, the management came to him and said, we really want to dramatically increase the amount of pro bono we have here, and we want you to figure out how to do it. So George went about that by interviewing people at the law firms where they had vibrant pro bono practices, and took all that information and put it together and came up with the Pro Bono Council position. That position has been replicated by more than 100 firms across the country, and there are more than 300 full-time pro bono professionals today. Like Rod Boggs, the namesake of the award, George has had an immeasurable impact in the civil rights area through his work on fair housing cases, through his leadership on the Washington Lawyers Committee, on the board, and as co-chair for several years, and on his wise counsel to the Equal Rights Center and the Fair Housing Council. And then in addition to all that, he really has forever changed the landscape of pro bono through designing this public service council position that's been replicated across the country and by more than 100 firms.
It's my pleasure to welcome to the stage George Ruttinger. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the luncheon. My name is Neil Eggleston. I am the other co-chair, along with Jeannie Rhee, of the luncheon today. I'm a partner at Kirkland & Ellis. To start the second half of our program, let us continue with our recognition of the important pro bono co-counsel relationships that really are the hallmark of the work of the Washington Lawyers Committee, and the reason for so much of the committee's success over many decades. This next video showcases Jeannie Rhee, my co-chair. I'm thrilled that I could introduce a video of Jeannie, and an amazing team from Paul Weiss, as well as the National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, in the landmark case against the Proud Boys. Many of you will remember both what happened and the case as you would have followed these. In December 2020, members of the Proud Boys attacked and vandalized property of the Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church in downtown DC. They violently destroyed the church's Black Lives Matter banner. The legal team worked through the holidays to prepare and file the lawsuit on January 4th, 2021, actually just 4 days before the attack on the Capitol occurred on January 6th. We'll go to the video.
The ancestors who dreamt the church wanted the church to be 5 blocks away from the White House, close to the corridors of power, because they wanted to make both, well, really I've expanded it. They wanted to make a theological statement, an anthropological statement, and an architectural statement. So the theological statement that they wanted to make was that the God of the American empire was not the God of the universe. The God that took land, labor, plundered, was not the God of all human beings. And so they wanted to erect a space where all human beings would be welcome, where all human beings would know that they were made in the image and likeness of God, and that those human beings would then engage themselves in work locally, nationally, globally to bring liberation, to bring justice, to bring abundance to all people.
Metropolitan AME is a church with a long, centuries-long history here in the District of Columbia. It is very connected to the community here. They've done voter registration drives. They did HIV education when HIV was such a scourge in the District of Columbia. They have held funerals and wakes. Rosa Parks lay in state at AME before she was brought to the Capitol.
Shortly thereafter, I got a communication from Cornell Brooks, the former president of the NAACP, who's also a member of the congregation. He connected me with Washington Lawyers Committee. He was the one that made the introduction. And he said, I recommend that these be your partners in this pursuit.
We needed to hold the Proud Boys accountable. We needed to hold their leadership accountable. And we brought several claims against them for destroying a Black Lives Matter banner on the property of the church. The racial justice implications were clear, the white supremacy implications were clear, and our decision was to go after this organization for the hate-fueled activity that they pursued in December of 2020.
This case went to a default judgment hearing last year, which is what happens when defendants just don't respond to a case. And the result of the default judgment hearing was a judgment of punitive damages of over $1 million against the Proud Boys organization and the defendants who were members of the Proud Boys who led this attack on the church, which was an incredible victory. So where we are now is trying to enforce that judgment. So we're continuing to take discovery of the Proud Boys, we're continuing to depose them, we're continuing to pursue discovery of where their assets are so that we can collect.
I hope that the case also serves as an example for other hate-fueled organizations that would try to do the same thing. It's incredibly important to hold not only the Proud Boys and its leadership accountable, but every other hate-fueled organization that would threaten equality in this country, that threatens racial justice in this country, and that acts the way that the Proud Boys did in this case on their agenda of hate.
The fact that the Washington Lawyers Committee is committed to this work and they're in DC made them an unbelievable partner for us. There were so many different tactical things that we had to do, even putting aside the fact that they're wonderful partners who are committed to the case that we were pursuing and are committed to this issue. Their knowledge and skill just at a tactical level was incredibly helpful.
It's been like having a family of really smart attorneys. It's been like having camaraderie with people who are as committed to a vision of justice as we are in our tradition. It's been people walking me through every detail, preparing me late nights, early mornings, ensuring that every legal stone was turned over, that every possible potential outcome that would hold the Proud Boys and others like them to account, that would come into being. They became family, and the trust, the bond with the Washington Lawyers Committee, it grew and it continues to grow.
So that was really nice of him, but I'm not sure all families really like having a really smart lawyer in them. So, but apart from that, in any event, I'd like to ask the members of the Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church, the Paul Weiss and Lawyers Committee team to stand and congratulate them on this award. This is the type of impactful work that can happen when you people come to these lunches and donate to it. They are doing fantastic work here. Thank you. Please stand. Now I'm thrilled to introduce the first ever Corporate Citizen Leadership Award to our long-term partner, BDO. This award has been established to recognize a corporate leader with a strong commitment to civil rights and racial justice. The next video shows how BDO has been a true partner of the Washington Lawyers Committee through litigation support, forensic accounting, risk management, tax services, and as a member of the Corporate Advisory Board. Let's take a look at the video.
The Washington Lawyers Committee has partnered with BDO on several workers' rights cases. Two of them were larger employment discrimination cases with multiple plaintiffs, and BDO was able to work with us to provide damages reports. So asking us what information we needed to ask our clients about how much they made, how much they expected to make, what their health insurance was, all the things that we may not have even thought to ask. And then they produced reports that we could use to successfully settle both of those lawsuits for high values. In another instance, the Washington Lawyers Committee worked with BDO in a situation where we had 400 or so clients who had been robbed of their paychecks. They worked for a company and it went out of business overnight and the owners fled. And BDO helped us to track down where we might look for assets, how we might find money to get for these innocent hundreds of workers who were cheated.
We brought in one of our statistical sampling experts to look at the data, and he was able to make determinations that there was, in fact, indications of discrimination based on where favorable assignments were not provided to certain minority officers. There was situations where promotions were denied for qualified candidates. There was also situations where if there was any disciplinary action taken against someone, that we saw that the minority officers were disciplined more harshly than similar situations with white officers. And so our statistical sampling expert wrote an expert report, and our damages expert wrote a damages report. Those two reports were used as part of the case. It was presented to the court, and the court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. And so as a result of that, the police department had to make a number of improvements to their policies and procedures dealing with disciplinary actions and promotions and things of that nature. And the court also awarded damages to the plaintiffs as well as to the attorneys, and also awarded a $5 million amount based on the fact that the federal laws require that in civil cases that that amount be paid to the plaintiffs.
Attorneys aren't mathematicians. We don't necessarily know the questions to ask, but BDO knows how to check all the boxes to make sure that our calculations are airtight. So when we're giving a defendant a settlement demand, we have complete confidence that our numbers are going to move the needle. And BDO has the expertise to know exactly what they're doing so that we feel confident when we're providing those numbers over. BDO is able to look not just at lost wages, but how much would this person be making if they had been working here for another 30 years, say? Or what would be the value of their 401k if they had stayed there and hadn't been fired? So there's more deeper mathematical skills and an understanding of finances that BDO really has, and that the Washington Lawyers Committee has our litigation skills, but not the same mathematical skills that BDO can bring to the table.
Working with the committee has been a very rewarding opportunity for BDO. We feel that it's given us an opportunity to serve the community and to give back to the community. It's also giving us an opportunity for us to achieve, what we believe is, that we're only as strong as our communities that we serve.
It is important for the Washington Lawyers Committee and our clients for BDO and other companies like them to get involved because they can bring to the table manpower and expertise that we don't have. And we are representing low-wage workers, low-wage clients, people who don't have the capacity to pay out of pocket, but are often going up against big adversaries that do have the money and financial resources to pay for their own experts. So when BDO comes to the table, it levels the playing field and it heightens the chances that our clients are going to achieve the victory that they deserve.
So thank you very much. We now move to our final award of the day, the Wiley A. Branton Award, which recognizes a deep commitment and accomplishment in civil rights. Wiley A. Branton was a tireless advocate for civil rights and equal justice throughout his entire career. As a private practitioner, a leader of federal agencies in Washington, and a dean of the Howard University School of Law. The Branton Award is annually bestowed upon members of the legal community whose careers embody a deep and abiding commitment to civil rights and economic justice advocacy. This year's honoree, Vanita Gupta, a longtime friend, so pleased, has devoted her entire career to civil rights work. Here to present the award to Vanita is former Attorney General Eric Holder. Holder served in the administration of President Obama, was the first African-American Attorney General. He is a great friend to the Washington Lawyers Committee. And let me just say, going off script a little bit, so I was White House counsel and overlapped with Eric when he was Attorney General. And periodically, frequently on a Monday morning, I would get a call to go down to the Oval. And the president would have some idea that I had never heard about before. Most were good, some were a little wacky, and they were all legal. And I thought to myself, oh my God, the president's been talking to Eric again. So I would call Eric and say, how about a heads up next time? And he would say, well, I didn't know which ones the president was paying any attention to, so I didn't know which one to give you a heads up about. In any event, he received the Branton Award in 2017, and at the time it was presented by the late John Lewis. Please welcome A.G. Holder to the podium.
Good afternoon. And as I just said to Neil, thanks so much for giving me up there. That was really, really sweet. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today to celebrate the Washington Lawyers Committee, to remember the legacy of Wiley Branton, and to confer this prestigious award on a very worthy recipient. Now, Wiley Branton was a civil rights icon who devoted his life to insisting that our country live up to its founding ideals. He's well known for desegregating Arkansas's schools, leading the voter education project, and serving as the dean of the Howard University School of Law. At just the age of 33, he filed a lawsuit that would make its way to the Supreme Court and pave the way for the Little Rock Nine to integrate Arkansas's public schools. But he didn't wait until he'd been practicing law for decades, or until he was a partner or head of a government agency before he started speaking out against injustice. He started when he was a teenager. Now, Wiley Branton led a protest at his high school because new uniforms that were supposed to go to his all-black school were diverted to an all-white school. When he was just 20 years old, he went off to serve in World War II, building bridges, actually building actual bridges in the South Pacific. After Mr. Branton saw how unfairly black soldiers were being treated, he, a soldier, wrote the government in protest. By the time he filed the school desegregation lawsuit, he had already spent much of his 20s working as a lawyer defending African Americans wrongfully accused of crimes. He started young, and he kept up the fight throughout his lifetime. Now, the Branton Award is special to me because Wiley Branton represents the best of our country's civil rights advocates and fighters for justice. This award is part of that legacy, and my good friend, Vanita Gupta, is part of that continuing effort. I had the pleasure of working with Vanita during the Obama administration. I will not, however, reveal any kinds of things that, as my dear friend Neil did. Although we had some really interesting conversations, but I won't talk about those. But I had the pleasure of working with Vanita during the Obama administration, and I saw her passion for justice, but her commitment to civil rights and public service began long before then. Recognized as one of the nation's leading civil rights lawyers, Vanita served as Associate Attorney General until earlier this year, leading the Justice Department's work on building police community trust, increasing support for gun violence survivors, promoting economic opportunity, and expanding community violence intervention programs. Vanita was also head of the Civil Rights Division during the Obama administration, overseeing change-inducing investigations of the Ferguson, Baltimore, and Chicago police departments, and successfully focusing on protecting the right to vote. In addition to her distinguished record at the Department of Justice, Vanita was president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and directed the Center for Justice at the American Civil Liberties Union. She began her legal career at the Legal Defense Fund, where, among other work, she led the effort to overturn the wrongful drug convictions of 38 individuals in Tulia, Texas, and helped to negotiate a $6 million settlement on their behalf. Now, Vanita's leadership in so many places has been nothing short of consequential, and it has been transformative. But perhaps Vanita's greatest legacy lies in her unwavering dedication to giving voice to those who have been too easily marginalized in our great but still imperfect nation. Whether she is fighting for the rights of immigrants, advocating for criminal justice reform, or challenging racial practices still present in our society, her commitment and her work demonstrate that Vanita's commitment to justice knows no bounds. So to the young lawyers in this room, and this is chronologically or whether you are young at heart, you can be 50, you can be 60, you can be 70, you can be 80, you can still be a young lawyer. At 90, it gets a little questionable, and at 100, you're just old, but you can still be involved. But to the young lawyers in this room, it is my hope that the work of Vanita Gupta, Wiley Branton, and others will inspire you to act. And I mean to act, to make America more fair and more just. As Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But we know that that arc does not bend on its own. Positive change is not promised. The necessary movement requires all of our attention and all of our dedication and our active involvement. I think it is time again for us to push a status quo that is too often indifferent and sometimes hostile. Our country is depending once again on young people to step up and to help behind and help bend that arc towards justice, just like Wiley Branton did, like John Lewis did, like John Nash did, like Diane Nash did, and as the founders of the Washington Lawyers Committee did and do when they are challenged by history. I challenge each of you to determine which part of the struggle you will give your talent and your time. In short, be like Vanita. Be like Vanita. It is my honor to present the 2024 Wiley Branton Award to a great leader, a dear friend, and a continuing shaper of the nation's consciousness, Vanita Gupta.
Thank you. It's great to see this full room. I don't have words sufficient to convey my gratitude for the 82nd Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder. In 2014, he and President Obama plucked a rather junior civil rights lawyer who had spent her entire career suing the government to helm the Civil Rights Division. His support, mentorship, and friendship mean the world to me, and his moral courage and leadership throughout his incredible career have impacted communities across the nation. In 2017, at this same event, the mighty John Lewis presented A.G. Holder with the Wiley A. Branton Award, and I am deeply, deeply humbled today to have A.G. Holder do the same for me. Thank you. I am also honored to receive this award in Dean Branton's name. His efforts to end legal segregation and inequality inspire us to do more to make the promise of our Constitution real for all people in this country. I'm grateful to the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs, and to my friend Joanne Lynn, and to the entire staff and board for this honor. For more than 50 years, the committee has fought landmark battles in pursuit of a more equitable society. Their recent docket is a testament to their impact. From winning tutoring, counseling, and educational opportunities for incarcerated young people, to a fair housing settlement on behalf of a resident who experienced housing discrimination, to a $1 million judgment against the Proud Boys for their role in a violent attack on the Metropolitan AME Church. The work you do every day to vindicate the rights of those whose voices have been silenced or who otherwise wouldn't have access to our legal system remains so vitally important. So I would like to ask the committee's staff to please stand if you're able so that we can show our appreciation. This team deserves our applause and our generous support, and I can say that now that I'm not at the Justice Department anymore. So thank you all for everything that you do every day. Like many of you in this room, I've spent my career working on issues where the outlook appeared bleak or unwinnable. I know many of us feel that way about certain things today. But if there's one takeaway from my remarks, let it be this. Progress may not be linear or even recognizable in the moment, but we have to persist. The current state of affairs will not be the final word unless we let it be. Every one of us, and this is in the spirit of A.G. Holder just now too, every single one of us in this room has a role to play in protecting our democracy and the kind of America we want. I began my career at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and my first cases as a young lawyer brought me to Tulia, Texas in 2001. I teamed up with law firms, including a few in this room, and together we represented dozens of African Americans who had been railroaded by their local criminal justice system and imprisoned for bogus crimes. It was an uphill battle. Our clients were poor and had been disenfranchised. This country had 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. I drove for hours across Texas, going from prison to talk to my clients, staying up nights feverishly working to meet deadlines. And the work of our formidable team and clients paid off. In 2003, Governor Rick Perry pardoned the individuals who were wrongfully convicted, and we obtained a $6 million civil settlement on their behalf. That win was powerful not only because my clients walked out of prison, but because we prevailed when no one thought we could. And we helped fuel momentum for bipartisan criminal justice reform in Texas and around the country. At the ACLU, I worked with groups across the political spectrum to advocate for evidence-based criminal justice policies that would save lives, save money, and keep people safe. I could not have imagined in 2003 that 10 years later, the nation's chief law enforcement officer, A.G. Holder, would give a historic speech acknowledging that, quote, too many Americans go to too many prisons for far too long and for no good law enforcement reason, and announcing federal policies building off of bipartisan state reforms around the country. This was a tremendous step forward, but as soon became clear, far from enough to address racial disparities in our criminal justice system. I arrived at the Justice Department in October of 2014, when the nation was roiling in the aftermath of Michael Brown's killing in Ferguson, Missouri. We rolled up our sleeves and worked with law enforcement and civil rights groups to advance constitutional policing through our investigations and consent decrees. We championed de-escalation and crisis intervention training. After issuing our report about Ferguson's predatory fines and fees targeting Black residents, we sent a letter to state courts urging reform of the unlawful use of fines and fees nationwide. We sought to address the impact of the criminalization of poverty on real people and on perceptions of the legitimacy of the justice system. In 2017, as I helmed the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and watched that work stall or become undone, I knew that that would not be the final word. George Floyd's murder in 2020 and the ensuing global mobilization for racial justice made that clear. When I returned to the Justice Department in 2021, we picked up the pieces and built off of what we had started. We revived tools like the COPS Office's Collaborative Reform Program. We updated and reissued the Fines and Fees letter. And when Congress failed to enact the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, we worked with the White House and law enforcement and civil rights partners on an executive order, a historic executive order that incorporated many of its provisions, including an updated federal use of force policy and a first ever national police misconduct database and a DOJ accreditation regime. Now, could the executive order be rescinded by a different administration? Yes. But could Congress also one day enact the George Floyd bill into law? Absolutely. We don't know what the future holds, but we have to do the work no matter what. I know there's a lot that we are feeling anxious about right now. The Dobbs decision taking away a constitutional right was absolutely devastating. It is no understatement to say it was a wake-up call. At the Justice Department, Attorney General Garland immediately asked me to chair a reproductive rights task force to make sure DOJ was doing all that it could to enforce federal protections for reproductive health access. While we await 2 Supreme Court decisions about access to emergency abortion care and abortion medication, it's been heartening to see that everywhere the right to abortion has been on the ballot, people have voted to preserve access. I know that the status quo will not be the final word because I know people will refuse to let it be. Of course, it isn't just Dobbs that's making people anxious today. We're living amidst sustained efforts to limit the right to vote, election denialism, and unlawful threats against election administrators. Amidst attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, chilling those efforts from the boardrooms to schools. We're seeing book bans and the erasure of African American history. Litigation that is turning the 14th Amendment literally on its head and weaponizing an ahistorical and disingenuous view to undermine the very communities and values that were core to its origin story. Not to mention growing authoritarian trends and polarization and the rise in hate and extremism. But what I've learned in my career so far is that civil rights work is sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It requires constant creativity to overcome new obstacles. It requires a willingness to listen and build coalitions with unlikely allies who can make our efforts more strategic and smarter. It requires taking the long view. At a time when we cannot assume longstanding civil rights precedent will remain the law of the land, when hard-fought achievements of the civil rights movement are fragile and at risk, I ask you to stay hopeful. The beauty of this country and the promise of our legal framework is not that we are perfect, but that we never stop working to make our highest ideals real for all people in America. That is the incredible power and responsibility that we have as members of the legal profession. After all, laws don't vindicate rights, people do. And these people are here in this room. Think about what Dean Branton was up against: the unrestrained racism, de jure segregation, daily threats to his life. Lawyers like Dean Branton played a critical role in not only moving us closer to a more inclusive democracy, but in giving people hope, in helping them believe a better America was possible. Lawyers continue to play that role today, especially as so many people are losing faith in the integrity of our judicial system, the rule of law, and even in our democracy. As John Lewis said, democracy is not a state, it is an act. It requires all of us seeing ourselves as part of this American experiment and working to protect it. More than ever, we need lawyers of good conscience to extend the promise of equality and opportunity to every person in this country, including those who have been overlooked, marginalized, and without protection for too long. We must remember, this work has never been easy. We won't get the outcome we want every time. But when we roll up our sleeves and refuse to back down, when we reject cynicism and despair, when we persist and stay in the fight against all odds, then real change is possible. So stay hopeful and keep pushing forward. Keep believing in the ongoing project of American democracy and the rule of law. We cannot take them for granted. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And if you see on your table the menu as well as the programming and the QR code at the bottom, I just want to say, if you have been even inspired a tiny bit by the remarks of former AG Holder and Vanita Gupta, look at that code and know that if each and every single one of you pledges $10, just $10, we will exceed our fundraising goal and make this the most successful luncheon ever. Again, just to paraphrase here, everybody can do their part, and it starts with the QR code. We are all done here. We want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, hopefully from the bottom of your checkbooks, to continue the critical work that the Washington Lawyers Committee does. We will see you next year here at the next award luncheon. Thank you.